Why trying to fix things often makes them worse. The Cobra Effect, there's a story, and although it sounds like a parable, it's real. In colonial India, the British government faced a problem: cobras. Venomous, fast and deadly, they were a threat to both British officials and the locals. So the government did what seemed logical: they offered a bounty for every dead cobra. It worked. First, people hunted them, brought in the carcasses, collected their money, and everyone felt like progress was being made. But then something strange happened. People began breeding cobras. They created cobra farms just to kill them for the bounty. When the government realized this, they scrapped the program. And now, with no financial incentive, the breeders released their now worthless cobras into the wild. The result: more cobras than ever. The problem got worse because someone tried to fix it. Now, imagine you're trying to solve a problem in your life. Maybe it's your anxiety. Maybe it's your relationship. Maybe it's your job. And you think, I'll fix this with action, with force, with a plan. You reach for the most obvious solution. But sometimes, just like the British in India, you don't fix the problem. You feed it, you grow it, you make it worse. Why does this happen? Because the world isn't a machine. It's not a clean, linear system where input equals output. It's more like an ecosystem, alive, unpredictable, interconnected. Every action you take sends ripples into that system. And those ripples interact with other ripples in ways you can't always see. We like to believe we control outcomes, but often we control only intentions. The Cobra Effect is more than a quirky historical anecdote. It's a mirror. It reflects a deeper truth about human nature, about systems, and perhaps even about the universe itself. We are wired to do something in the face of discomfort or chaos. Our minds crave order. But sometimes, the most dangerous thing isn't doing nothing, it's doing the wrong thing with too much confidence.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Think about your own life. Have you ever tried to fix a friendship by over-explaining your side of things, only to make the other person feel unheard? Have you ever tried to make someone love you by giving more, doing more, sacrificing more, only to watch them pull further away? Have you ever tried to silence your inner critic with self-help mantras, only to make that voice even louder? Here's the paradox. When you try to fix everything, you often stop listening. You stop observing. You stop understanding. You become obsessed with your idea of how things should be, instead of seeing things as they are. The Cobra Effect teaches us that actions that seem logical in the short term can be devastating in the long term. But why do we keep falling into this trap? Because logic is seductive. It gives us the illusion of control. And because our brains abhor uncertainty, we prefer a bad plan over no plan. We'd rather do something than sit with discomfort. But what if the discomfort is trying to teach you something? What if your impulse to fix is actually masking a deeper fear, the fear that you're not enough, that you're powerless, that you can't control life? Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you tried to fix something and made it worse? Not just slightly worse, but catastrophically worse. What did that moment teach you? And here's a deeper question. Are you willing to admit that your best intentions sometimes carry unintended consequences? This is where philosophy steps in, not to give you a list of better fixes, but to challenge the very idea that life is a problem to be solved. The Stoics, those ancient warriors of the mind, believed that we suffer not from events, but from our judgments about them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What if trying to fix things is often just an attempt to change the outside world so that we don't have to change how we see it? But changing your perception isn't easy. It's not flashy. It doesn't produce instant results. It requires patience, humility, and a degree of surrender. And that's not a message we like to hear in a culture obsessed with optimization, efficiency, and hustle. In fact, the Cobra Effect is alive and well in modern society. Governments create policies to reduce homelessness and end up pushing people further into poverty. Companies implement productivity tools that burn out their employees. Parents try to protect their children from discomfort and raise adults who can't tolerate failure. But we always mean well. But meaning well isn't enough. So what do we do? Maybe the answer isn't to stop trying altogether. Maybe the answer is to try differently, with awareness, with curiosity, with a willingness to be wrong, to see the whole system, not just the part we want to change, to ask not, "How do I fix this?" but "What is this trying to teach me?" Because every problem is a mirror. And sometimes, when you look into it, you don't see a flaw to be corrected, you see a truth to be accepted. Let me leave you with this. What if the things you're trying hardest to fix are the very things that are meant to shape you? The trap of control. How our desire to master life unleashes chaos. We live in an age that worships control. We've built apps to track our sleep, devices to monitor our heartbeats, systems to optimize our productivity down to the second. We micromanage our own minds with therapy techniques, self-help books, and morning routines curated like rituals. And yet, despite all this, we are more anxious, more uncertain, and more disoriented than ever. Isn't that strange? The more we try to control life, the more chaotic it seems to become. It's as if reality is pushing back, reminding us that we were never in charge to begin with. This is the deeper layer of the Cobra Effect. It doesn't just happen in policy or history. It happens in the human soul. The desire to fix things is often a masked desire to control them. And that desire, while understandable, is also dangerous. Because life at its core is not built to be controlled. It's built to be experienced, engaged with, and sometimes even surrendered to. When we try to master life like a machine, we forget that it is more like a river. You don't control a river by damming it at every bend. You learn to move with it, to flow, to adapt. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "Trying to control the future is like trying to control a ghost. The more you reach for it, the more it slips through your fingers." And here's the irony: the tighter you grip life, the more it wriggles out of your hands. The more you try to force outcomes, the more resistance you create. Have you ever noticed that when you try to force someone to change, they become more stubborn? When you try to suppress a thought, it screams louder. When you chase happiness, it runs away. This is not a flaw in the system, it is the system. Control creates opposition. Fixation creates tension. And that tension often births the very problems we were trying to avoid. You try to control a child's behavior with strict rules, and they rebel harder. You try to control your partner's emotions, and they feel smothered. You try to control your own thoughts, and your mind becomes a battlefield. The more you try to master complexity with force, the more that complexity retaliates. But why are we so obsessed with control to begin with? Because we are afraid. Deep down, beneath the surface of every desire to fix, lies a fear of chaos. We fear what we don't understand. We fear being out of control because, to us, it feels like being vulnerable, exposed, or even powerless. And yet, what if vulnerability is not weakness, but truth? What if the human condition is to be out of control, to be subject to forces larger than ourselves, to dance with uncertainty rather than defeat it? There is a kind of wisdom in surrender, not the passive surrender of resignation, but the active surrender of engagement. It is the difference between trying to bend the world to your will versus listening to what the world is asking of you. It is the difference between saying, "How do I fix this?" and asking, "What does this moment require of me?" So let me ask you something that may change how you see yourself. What part of your life are you gripping too tightly? What are you trying so hard to fix, control, or optimize that you've forgotten how to simply be with it? What would happen if you loosened your grip not out of defeat, but out of trust? This isn't a call to laziness or apathy. It's a call to humility, to recognize that life is not a chessboard and we are not grandmasters. We are participants in a drama far older and more intricate than we can grasp. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not to act, but to observe, to listen, to wait. The Cobra Effect reminds us that even the best intentions can go wildly wrong when driven by fear disguised as logic. So maybe the real wisdom is not in asking, "How can I control this?" but "How can I align with the truth of this moment, even if it isn't what I wanted?" When logic backfires, the tragedy of good intentions and blind spots, there's a certain nobility in wanting to fix things. We tell ourselves, "If only I apply the right logic, the right tools, the right effort, I can make this better." And often, that belief is rewarded. You fix a leaky faucet by turning the right valve. You solve a math equation by following the rules. You repair a broken device by replacing the faulty part. So we take that mindset, the linear, problem-solving, engineering mindset, and we apply it to life itself. We apply it to relationships, to emotions, to culture, to morality. But here's the tragedy: life is not a machine. And logic, when applied to something irrational, emotional, or deeply human, can backfire catastrophically. This is the real philosophical weight of the Cobra Effect. It's not just that people tried to cheat the system. It's that the system itself was built on a flawed assumption that when you incentivize something, people will respond rationally in ways you expect. But humans aren't machines. We're not even consistently rational. We're complex, contradictory, and often driven by motivations we don't fully understand. When you try to fix a human problem with mechanical logic, you often expose your blind spots, and those blind spots are where unintended consequences breed. Let's zoom out. Think about the countless ways well-intentioned policies have gone wrong throughout history. Prohibition was meant to curb alcohol abuse. It created a black market and empowered organized crime. The war on drugs was meant to reduce addiction. It led to mass incarceration and systemic injustice. Even on a personal level, how many times have you tried to fix someone you love, only to injure the relationship? You thought you were helping. You thought you were guiding them toward a better version of themselves. But what you were really doing was imposing your logic onto their life. And this is where blind spots become dangerous. Because most of the time, we don't see them. That's why they're called blind spots. We don't know what we don't know. And when we act from a place of certainty driven by good intentions and the illusion of understanding, we often miss the deeper layers. We act too soon, We act too confidently, and we create ripple effects that we never intended. Let me ask you something unsettling. What if your most rational decisions were secretly rooted in fear or ego? What if the logic you used to justify your actions was just a mask for discomfort you didn't want to confront? What if your desire to fix someone else was actually a way to avoid fixing yourself? This isn't an attack on logic. Logic is beautiful, powerful, essential. But logic divorced from wisdom becomes dangerous. Wisdom is not just about knowing rules, it's knowing when to apply them and when to question them. It's knowing that not every problem requires a solution. Some problems require understanding, patience, or simply presence. In Eastern philosophy, particularly Taoism, there is a concept called Wu Wei, effortless action. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means flowing with the nature of things, acting in harmony with the situation instead of forcing your will upon it. This idea runs counter to everything our culture teaches us. We're told to hustle, push harder, optimize, and never settle. But sometimes wisdom whispers a different message. Step back, observe, let the situation unfold, and trust that not all change comes from control. The Cobra Effect is a cautionary tale, but it's more than that. It's an invitation to examine not just what we're doing, but why. To ask ourselves, is this action coming from clarity or compulsion, from wisdom or fear, from genuine care or the need to feel in control? Good intentions are not enough. In fact, they can be the most dangerous force when combined with ignorance. The road to hell, as the proverb goes, is paved with them. Because when we act with certainty without understanding, we don't just fail to fix the problem, we often become part of it. The wisdom of letting go, how acceptance can lead to real transformation. So what do we do? In a world where fixing often breaks, where logic can backfire, and where control breeds chaos. The answer, though it may sound paradoxical, is not to stop caring. It's not to give up. It's to shift the quality of our care from one of force to one of presence, from manipulation to awareness, from control to acceptance. And that word acceptance might sound soft, even passive. But in truth, it is one of the most powerful and misunderstood forces in all of philosophy. Acceptance is not surrendering to fate. It's not saying, this is fine when it very much isn't. Acceptance is the deep, quiet recognition that things are what they are before we try to change them. It's the refusal to warp reality into what we want before we've even understood what it is. And it's only from that place of clear, honest seeing that true transformation can begin. Letting go doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the right thing at the right time, without the feverish desperation to control every outcome. It means acting from a place of grounded clarity, not anxious reaction. And strangely, this kind of surrender leads to more effective action, not less. Because when you're not blinded by the urge to fix, you can see the situation for what it is. You can respond rather than react. You can choose rather than panic. Have you ever had a moment where you just stopped trying, where you gave up the struggle to change someone, to fix a situation, to improve yourself, and in that stillness, something shifted? Maybe the relationship softened. Maybe the solution appeared on its own. Maybe you changed in a way that all your previous effort couldn't produce. And that moment wasn't failure. It was wisdom. It was the quiet miracle of letting go. Think of nature. A tree doesn't try to fix the wind. A river doesn't argue with the rocks. The wolf doesn't wish the deer was slower, and the stars don't rearrange themselves for your convenience. There is a harmony to the natural world that arises not from control, but from alignment. When we learn to flow with life not in resignation, but in reverence, we begin to unlock a different kind of power. This is the ultimate lesson of the Cobra Effect. It's not just about what happens when policies go wrong. It's about what happens when we refuse to see the whole picture, when we act with haste instead of understanding, when we prioritize control over connection, certainty over curiosity, force over wisdom. The Cobra Effect is the universe's way of saying, slow down. Look deeper. Things are not always what they seem. So here's a final question, one that may take the rest of your life to answer. What in your life are you trying to fix? Not because it needs fixing, but because you're uncomfortable sitting with it. What pain, what uncertainty, what silence are you rushing to escape with action? And what would happen if, just for a moment, you stopped running? Sometimes, the deepest transformation comes not from doing more, but from allowing more. From trusting that life has its own intelligence, one that doesn't need constant management. From realizing that you are not the mechanic of the universe, but a participant in its unfolding. When we stop trying to fix everything, we begin to see everything. We begin to listen. We begin to understand. And in that space where control dissolves and presence begins, real change can finally take root. So the next time you're tempted to jump in, to fix, to force, pause. Ask yourself not just what can I do, but what is this moment asking of me? And maybe, just maybe, the answer will not be action, but awareness. Not fixing, but feeling. Not control, but connection. And in that we may finally discover the things we thought needed fixing were often the things that needed our deepest attention, our gentlest presence, and our quietest wisdom.